Good morning. I'm Congressman Adam Schiff, and we want to briefly address the Speaker's decision to remove Mr. Swalwell and myself from the Intelligence Committee, as well as his continuing threat to call a vote to remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm joined, of course, by my colleagues Eric Swalwell and Ilhan Omar. Let me just begin, if I can, to make a few observations about the decision on the Intelligence Committee and then hand it off to my colleagues. This decision by Kevin McCarthy to bow to the demands of the most extreme elements of his conference and use the Intelligence Committee as this kind of political plaything doesn't show the strength of his speakership. Indeed, it shows the weakness of his speakership, that he is so beholden to the most extreme elements of his conference. And it bodes, I think, poorly for how he'll conduct the remainder of his speakership for however long or short that may last. But more to the point, by arrogating to himself the decision about who on the Democratic side of the aisle should lead the Intelligence Committee, who should sit on the Intelligence Committee, he will cause the intelligence agencies, I think, to distrust this action, and in combination with the formation of this so-called Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, which ostensibly will have access to classified information, it will only, I think, breed distrust within the intelligence community as to what it can share and what it can feel confident about sharing with the Congress. That will impact policymakers in terms of the information that we have to make decisions about how to protect our national security. So this is, I think, not an unexpected but nonetheless destructive move by Kevin McCarthy that will bode ill in the future for the kind of decisions that he has to make to placate the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Paul Gosars, and of course his boss down in Mar-a-Lago, the disgraced former president. With that, let me turn over to my colleague Eric Swalwell, who I've had the pleasure of serving with on the Intelligence Committee for a great many years, one of our finest members and one of our most vigorous overseers. And indeed, part of McCarthy's motivation here is not just revenge, retaliation, and appeasing the radical elements of his conference. It's also an effort to impair the ability of Democrats to push back against abuses of the majority, and Eric Swalwell has been such an effective advocate on the committee. This is, I think, part and parcel of the motivation as well. Mr. Swalwell.
Thank you, Chairman Schiff. The new McCarthy looks a lot like the old McCarthy. The old McCarthy abused political power to punish and demean and smear his political opponents. And the new McCarthy in Washington today is doing the same. And throughout this journey of vengeance, the three of us have chosen to stick together because this isn't about any individual committee assignment. This is about an institution where the Speaker of the House is using his power to go after his political opponents and to pick them off the field. And that's why we've chosen every step of the way to stick together. In my case, it's purely political vengeance. Speaker McCarthy is choosing to do something that Speaker Boehner, Speaker Ryan, and Speaker Pelosi did not do, which is, with access to the same information, with the claims that Speaker McCarthy has made about me, Speaker Boehner, Speaker Ryan, and Speaker Pelosi kept me on the committee. Chairman Nunes, with access to the same information to which Mr. McCarthy is making claims about me, never made a peep, allowed me to stay on the committee. The claims that Mr. McCarthy has made about me that I could never get a security clearance, Mr. Schiff was also briefed on and supported me staying on the committee because the FBI said 3 times, all I did was 2 things. I helped them over and over, and I was never suspected of wrongdoing. The Washington Post, in response to Mr. McCarthy's claims, gave him 4 Pinocchios, which is a whopper, the highest amount that they can give for one of the biggest lies that you could tell about somebody else. So this is purely about political vengeance. The cost is not only removing us from the committee. On the Intelligence Committee, the cost is not only breaking, shattering the most precious glassware in the cabinet, a committee that's always been bipartisan. The cost are the death threats that Ms. Omar, myself, and Mr. Schiff keep getting because Mr. McCarthy continues to aim and project these smears against us. Even though we have said publicly these smears are bringing death threats, he continues to do it, which makes us believe that there's an intent behind it. But we will not be quiet. We're not going away. I think he'll regret giving all three of us more time on our hands. But at the end of the day, our mission now is to restore the credibility and integrity of this institution of which the Speaker has so gravely smashed and destroyed. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Omar, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the first member of that committee to be born in Africa who could serve on a subcommittee and lead a subcommittee on the Democratic side in a historic way because of her history and her bond to that continent.
Thank you, Chairman Schiff and Representative Swalwell. Our democracy and our governing bodies rest on a healthy and vibrant debate. Our strength lies not in our perfection, but in the diversity of our voices and our openness to civil discourse. That is why, whatever our disagreements might be as members of Congress, policy differences alone have not and must not be cause for eliminating someone from serving on a committee. In modern American history, the punishment of stripping a member of Congress of their committee assignments has been reserved for only the most egregious wrongdoings. Those convicted or indicted on corruption, those who have engaged in bribery, sexual misconduct, encouraged violence, or other grave charges. I have served on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Education and Labor Committee for the past 2 terms, committees that I have lived experience and expertise in. As a child who survived war, lived in a refugee camp, I would have never imagined that I would one day have the opportunity to serve on a subcommittee on Africa, global health, and global human rights. I would not have believed that I would one day not just serve as the first African-born member of Congress, but on a committee that oversees policies towards the continent. Kevin McCarthy's purely partisan move to strip us from our committee is not only a political stunt, but also a blow to the integrity of our democratic institution and threat to our national security. We are thankful to Leader Jeffries and House Democrats, and even some courageous Republicans, for standing with us. If McCarthy wants to denigrate the integrity of the House and its committees, we will always stand up to these efforts. I am grateful for the confidence of my constituents and my colleagues have shown me to serve on these committees, and I look forward to continuing that work of building a more peaceful world.
We're happy to respond to some questions. We understand the President is going to speak at noon, so we're going to try to be off the stage before then. Yes.
We heard from you, Representative Swalwell, just now, your defense answer to the accusation thing, but I'd like to hear from the both of you. And I know you've been asked these questions before, but in particular to Speaker McCarthy's accusation again last night that you should not be on the Intelligence Committee because he said that he's so lied about former Chairman Nunes. I want to give you a chance to directly respond and also to Representative Omar to the accusations that are laid against you.
Well, I can just say that Mr. McCarthy's rationalizations, justifications keep shifting. The cardinal sin appears to be that I led the impeachment of his master in Mar-a-Lago for withholding hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid from Ukraine, a nation that was even then at war with Russia, in order to extort that country into helping Donald Trump's re-election campaign. We proved those facts and got the first bipartisan vote in the Senate in history to remove a president. Kevin McCarthy calls that a hoax. Well, it was not a hoax. But he will do the former president's bidding. He is entirely reliant on the former president, and this is something the former president wants. But I can assure you that if the former president or Kevin McCarthy believes that this is going to stop any of us from fighting to protect our democracy, they're going to find out that the opposite is true. It only will intensify our commitment to doing so. I do want to mention, with respect to Mr. Swalwell also, that as he indicated, I sat in on that briefing. And when Kevin McCarthy misrepresents it and does that disservice to the American people, it's shameful. Mr. Swalwell has served honorably on our committee. He's never been accused of any kind of wrongdoing. This is a patently unfair smear by Mr. McCarthy, but that's what he traffics in, and that's what we're seeing.
I have addressed it. I've apologized. It's been 2.5 terms ago. And I think it is really important in all of our cases to remember it is not the accusations that McCarthy is making against us that is pushing for our removal from these committees. It is about revenge. It's about the appeasing the former president. All three of us have been a thorn in the back of the previous disgraced president. Republicans have been gunning for our seats and obviously know how effective that we have been in upholding the Constitution, in defending our democracy, in standing up to extremists, and we will continue to do that work regardless of whether we are seated on these committees or not.
My question is for Congressman Omar specifically. You've had at least 2 Republicans have come out so far and said they won't support removing you from your committee. I wonder if you've had any other private conversations to that effect, and if you think the Speaker may have bitten off more than he can chew by trying to take this to the full House when there may not be the support there.
So, if you remember in the last term when we removed 2 members of their committees, there was a precise reason for that. That was for inciting violence. You remember the speech Leader Hoyer made with an image of a rifle being held to my head and the head of other colleagues. We've all seen the video that Representative Paul Gosar made of killing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Speaker Pelosi, and President Biden. Many Republicans stood up and defended those members and their ability to continue to serve on committees even after they threatened the lives of their colleagues. Now, if those same members want the American people to believe that while they defended those acts, that they should not defend us to continue to serve, then it is going to show their hypocrisy. So I do believe that when and if this vote comes, it will be a moment of clarity. And I hope that many of these Republicans will have conscience and will not prove to their constituents and the American people just how much of partisan hacks they are, how much hypocrisy that they have, and show themselves to be a disgrace.
Do you believe a vote against you would succeed right now, or would it fail?
I don't know.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious to know what you all think about the fact that you all are being removed from committees or threatened, but George Santos has been set on committees. What does it say about the politics of our country right now? What does it say about the institution? Just any thoughts that you have about Santos being sat on committees and you all going through what you're going through?
Well, I'll take a quick stab at it and defer to my colleagues, but the hypocrisy just grabs you by the throat. This is a Republican speaker who is seating a human fraud, George Santos, on committees, a serial fabricator about every part of his existence. He's perfectly comfortable with it. He needs George Santos' vote, if that's the name that he's going by these days. This is someone who, Kevin McCarthy, who owes his allegiance to a party leader in Mar-a-Lago who dines with white nationalists and anti-Semites. He's putting people on committees who speak at white nationalist rallies. The hypocrisy just grabs you by the throat. But hypocrisy is probably the least of Mr. McCarthy's sins. The most significant impact is that he is continuing this destructive trend set by his party leader of tearing down our institutions, of degrading the Congress. And you know, this new select committee that he's establishing is going to simply just bring greater discredit on the Congress. And that's our paramount concern, is what he's doing to our institutions. In a bitter bargain to get the gavel, to get the speakership, he is slowly undermining each part of the work of this institution, and that's certainly not in the best interest of the country, which expect us to be working to make sure that we confront inflation, that we deal with the economic challenges that we have, that we create an economy that works for everyone. This is what our focus should be on, not on what the lowest common denominator in the Republican conference wants.
I would just add, you're seeing now the fulfillment of Kevin McCarthy's corrupt bargain, a corrupt bargain with Marjorie Taylor Greene, somebody who declared on January 5, the day before the attack on the Capitol, that this is 1776, someone who cheered on the insurrectionists, somebody who, as we honor the police officers who were injured that day, she goes to the D.C. jail to make sure that insurrectionists are taken care of. The first time this person's ever cared about the conditions of a jail is when insurrectionists are inside it. She's going on the Homeland Security Committee. It's too rich that the day that George Santos, yesterday, admits to the Federal Election Commission that he defrauded them in his statement, that he put $500,000 of his own money into the campaign. It's too rich that the day that he admits that he lied to a federal agency, that the ranking member of the Intel Committee is pulled off the committee. It's just too rich that as the three of us are about to lose our committees, this corrupt bargain also enables Paul Gosar, who depicted himself killing a colleague, goes on to a committee. It's too rich that this corrupt bargain also includes $75 billion to defund the troops, defund the troops by $75 billion, a part of the promises that he made for this corrupt bargain. So we are caught up in this corrupt bargain. It doesn't feel good at all. It doesn't feel good personally, but that's not what's important. It doesn't feel good for the country and the Congress, because they ran on inflation, crime, border, and they're not taking on any of that. This is the nonsense they're focused on.
Last question. Yeah, I have a question for Congressman Swalwell as well. I was wondering, so your defense to the Republicans' argument that you cannot get a security clearance in the private sector, you kind of defended that saying you cooperated with the FBI. Could you walk us through how you handled that situation after that that issue with the Chinese spy?
Sure.
How did you handle that?
Yeah, and again, I'm happy to heat up the leftovers on something that happened in Barack Obama's first term. But you don't have to take my word for it, because in my predominantly Asian district, 35% larger than any other ethnicity in my district, we had a Chinese woman volunteer for the campaign starting in 2012. FBI came to me and told me this person is not who you and your team think they are. We worked with them. And the FBI, 3 different times when this investigation was leaked, the FBI 3 times said no wrongdoing. All he did was help us. Donald Trump at the time had access to more classified information than anyone who walked the earth. Just like he called out my colleagues here at rallies, called me out all the time. If he could have embarrassed me to weaponize classified information, you know he would have. John Boehner reappointed me to the committee. Speaker Ryan reappointed me to the committee. So again, I don't want to validate these smears, but Kevin McCarthy is making claims about something that 2 prior speakers had access to, and Speaker Boehner, I know for a fact, was briefed on, and didn't do anything, didn't say anything, kept me on the committee because it was nothing other than doing what every American, I hope, would do if they found out that somebody like this Chinese individual was trying to infiltrate the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much.